2132.
Yeah, that's working.
Yeah.
321321.
Hello.
Yeah, you've got one.
Yeah. Catch your.
Just trying to work out. I'll find one. Everything seems. On this side.
Fantastic.
What happened? Just. Everything's. So we're just doing another audio check because we're having technical problems. I'm pleased the mayor can still hear me. Everything seems to be okay. Don't know. Gremlins. Isn't that weird?
Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Planning Committee. I'm Councillor Martin Warnes, Chair of the Planning Committee, and I will be chairing the meeting. To begin the meeting, there are a few matters of housekeeping. Action in the event of emergency. There are no practice alarms planned for this evening, so if an alarm sounds, please evacuate the town hall by going down the main staircase or the back staircase to the High Street and then to the car park behind the town hall in St Runwald Street. This meeting is being live streamed to the council's YouTube page and will be available after the meeting. Please would speakers use their microphones at all times and speak directly into the microphone, and would participants please mute the microphones when not speaking. Introductions. Members of the committee and officers will introduce themselves, starting from my left.
Good evening, Councillor Sam McCarthy representing Shrub End Ward and Deputy Chair of the committee.
Councillor Robert Davidson, Mersey and Pyfleet Ward.
Councillor Tracy Arnold, Stanway Ward.
Councillor Mark Gocher, Castle Ward.
Councillor Jeremy Hagan, Stanway Ward, substituting for Councillor Tate.
Councillor Jackie McLean, Stanley Ward.
Councillor Catherine Spinland from St Anne's and St John's Ward.
Councillor Kaylee Rippingale representing Newtown and Christchurch.
Chris Harden, Planning Officer.
Lucy Mondon, Planning Manager.
Simon Cairns, Joint Head of Planning.
Martin Mason, County Highways.
Robert Carmichael, Democratic Services Officer.
Thank you all for introducing yourself. Members of the committee may use electronic devices to access their meeting papers, and visitors are welcome to use mobile phones and other devices, including cameras, but please use these discreetly. Set them to silent and do not use voice or camera flash functions. We will have a break at 7:30 and every 90 minutes afterwards. There are toilets on every floor in the building and the induction loop is in this room. Whilst determination of a planning application is not a quasi-judicial process, unlike certain licensing functions carried out by the local authority, it is a formal administrative process involving the application of national and local policies, reference to legislation and case law, as well as rules of procedure, rights of appeal, and expectation that people will act reasonably and fairly. All involved in these decisions should remember that the possibility that an aggrieved party may seek a judicial review or complain to the Ombudsman on grounds of maladministration or a breach of the authority's code. Are there any apologies? We've already recognised that Councillor Hagan is substituting for Councillor Tate. Right, no other apologies and no other subs. Item 3, declarations of interest. None, thank you. Urgent items, there are none. Have your say. If anyone has a petition they wish to present to me on any of the items on this agenda this evening, please do so now. There are no minutes. No minutes have been presented to the committee for confirmation. We now come to the items on the agenda. We have two items today. Item 7.1, which is land to the east of Nayland Road, Great Hawksley, Colchester, application number 230625. It's recommended for approval and the presenting officer is Lucy Mondon. We have listed one speaker for the public, but Andrew Ransom is happy not to speak. And item 7.2 is 50 London Road, Stanway, Colchester, CO3 0HB, and that is recommended for approval. The presenting officer is Chris Harden, and we have for the public Andrew Feasey and Councillor Scott Boutel to speak. Now, on the understanding that Andrew Ransom, who's speaking for, is happy not to speak on this occasion, can I ask whether councillors are willing to take that application en bloc, or is there any councillor that wishes to have it discussed at the meeting, or any officer?
Can I just ask a question, Chairman?
Of course.
There was a site visit to the second application, and did anybody go on it?
Yes, my understanding is that some councillors did, yes.
Okay, forgive me, I didn't, but I'd just be interested in their opinion, that's all.
But that's the second item.
Yeah, but that's item 7.2, and at the moment we're on 7.1. Thank you, councillor. So, there has been no indication that anyone wishes to have this application discussed, so therefore, what's the bit I need to ask? Yeah, can I ask for a proposer that this is accepted en bloc?
Yeah, I'll propose, Chair.
Councillor McCarthy, is there a seconder? Councillor McLean, thank you. All those in favour, please show.
That is 8, but without that, we have to have a unanimous vote. Oh, there it is. That is unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. And at this point, I'm using my discretion as chair, and I'm allowing Alderman Christopher, forgotten your name, sorry, Arnold. All the times I've sat on committee with you, and all of a sudden I had a senior moment. So
26 years, and I've been forgotten. I'm very grateful to you, Chairman, for allowing me to speak, but in this context it is Councillor and not Alderman, because I'm Chairman of Great Hawksley Parish Council. Had I still been a member of this authority, I have no doubt that I would be sitting before you at this point, thanking Lucy and her team for her patience and perseverance and diligence in delivering what she's delivered. The site was allocated on my watch some years ago. We've had the number of planning applications as set out in the agenda. There has been very thorough engagement between this authority and indeed the agent for the landowner and Great Hawksley Parish Council over a number of years. And everything that is in the report, all the recommendations, I have to say Great Hawksley Parish Council has been over it. We are delighted with what has been achieved. And I know it's only an outline application, but Lucy and her team and the policy team who are not here tonight have, in my opinion, done a great job. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Alderman Arnold. So therefore, I confirm that that item 7.1 has been determined in line with the officer recommendation in the report and any relevant amendment sheet, and there will not be further discussion on that item. Any interested parties in attendance for those items may now wish if you leave. Sorry. Thank you. So we move on to item 7.2, and this is 50 London Road. And can I ask Chris whether you will present to the committee?
Thank you, Chairman. I'll just share my screen. Right, yes, you can see that. Good. So this is brought back to committee following the site visit today. So I'll just run through the issues again. So it's a change of use from the post office to a cafe, Class E, and there'll be the installation of an extract system, which has already been carried out, and also a first floor one bed flat, and additional parking on the other side of the road at London Road.
which you saw on site. So I'll just take you through the plans. So this is the host site, which would be the cafe. Parking spaces shown at the front. And you've got a cycle storage area to the rear. And then this outbuilding at the back would be used for waste storage for the cafe and for the first floor flat. This shows the location of additional parking down the road in red beyond the actual zebra crossing. Here's pictures of the site to remind you. This has now been paved in front of the site, as members would have noted on site. This is an aerial view showing the context, showing lengthy rear gardens to the properties. And then this shows the proximity of the garage where there would be extra parking provision at the front and alongside. Zebra crossing located here with the walkway down to the application site. And this is the first floor of the property showing the flat. So you've got a living dining room, kitchen and a bedroom, bathroom to the rear. Here's pictures of the flue that has been constructed on site. And then this is a view of the street, slightly changed, as I said, when you've got a paved area, paving stones in front of this property now, which, to be honest, does look visually better than it did before. Then quickly running through the site, pictures of the flue. This has now grown back a bit in terms of very low level grass, so it does look a bit better at the rear at the moment. And then inside, a picture of the restaurant. There is a small bar area in there as well, as the members who visited the site will have noted. So I'll just take you back to the site plan now. Probably this is the best plan to look at. So in terms of planning considerations, the principle of the site is considered, or the use of the site is considered acceptable for commercial and for residential. It's in the settlement limits and in a sustainable location, and local plan policies and the NPPF do support sustainable development. So the proposal therefore should be judged on its planning merits. So in terms of residential amenity, the scheme is considered acceptable by environmental protection, subject to the very detailed conditions as outlined in the committee report, which includes odour condition from the flue, no takeaway, hours of use, the boundary noise levels, the provision of the refuse facility, and also the additional condition added since the previous committee report where there wouldn't be outside use of the area to the rear of the cafe for cafe customers' purposes. It's not considered there'll be any overlooking issues. And so subject to these conditions, the scheme is acceptable in terms of residential amenity impact. In terms of the visual impact of the flue, that's not visually prominent. I've added in another condition on the committee report, as you'll see, as discussed at the last committee, about mitigating the appearance of that, which could be done potentially with brick slips, for example. So turning to the other key issue, the highways issues. The Highway Authority are happy with the parking provision, and that's even without the extra garage space on the site down the road. It's a sustainable location. The standards are maximum, not minimum. There are good transport links. People could walk or cycle to the site, and there are double yellow lines outside the site, so people can't park in front of that site. It's not considered there would be a detriment to highway safety or highway capacity, therefore. Having looked at the assignments made on site, I would recommend a slight adaptation to condition 14 with regard to parking provision, whereby we get a detailed plan of the precise layout of the parking at the garage down the road, to ensure that there is manoeuvring space for vehicles to leave the MOT centre, and that can be achieved by the parking being put at an angle along the side, which should also be beneficial for cars coming into the site so that they don't have to get square onto the parking space, and also the precise layout in front of the garage there. It certainly looks like there are 10 spaces available, but the parking detail would be beneficial, so we can add that into condition 14. Also, we could add something to condition 19 about the directional signage, where there could be parking signage and layout on the garage site down the road, for example, marking out those spaces and having a sign on those spaces saying they're for customers of the cafe. So that can be in addition to condition 19 directional signage. Alternatively, you could add that into condition 14. So that will button down that parking provision on that site down the road. So subject to that, it's not considered there'll be a conflict with local plan policy or the MPPF in terms of parking provision and highway safety. So just turning to the other issues, finally, there is adequate amenity space on the site of the cafe for the residential unit. The UU for community provisions has now been completed. There's no specific impact upon vegetation from this application, or indeed upon wildlife from this application. The barbers mentioned in a number of comments is not proposed within this application and is not part of this application on the site as such. That building is proposed to be used for storage and refuse storage for this current proposal. If a barber's was proposed, it would need a new separate application and would be judged on its merits, including the cumulative impact with the cafe. So the recommendation is for approval. Just to clarify that there have been some extra conditions added from the previous committee report as per the discussion at the committee. So those would be ensuring the private amenity space is not used for cafe customers, that the flue would be mitigated visually, and also the directional signage on the front of the cafe. And an informative was also added to indicate that any advertisements on the site should be in keeping with the character of the area. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chris. So before, so we have a public speaker for Andrew Feasey. If you'd like to come forward, thank you. You have got up to 3 minutes, and the bell will sound at 2 minutes. Press the red button when you're ready to speak.
Thank you. Thank you for the committee for coming to site this afternoon. It is appreciated. To clarify a few points from the visit this afternoon, the parking to the front was raised, and the construction of this, my client has confirmed that has been upgraded to a suitable parking sub-base and suitable paving slabs which are suitable for vehicle loading. Secondly, building regs will be applied for and completed before any cafe is open. This will cover items such as the fire regulations, WC toilets, and the operation of the cafe, and the cafe can't open until regs are in place. So that's separate to planning, and that's why my client stopped works. He had a stop notice. Instead of risking a fine, he stopped work. So that hopefully covers some of the questions asked. The off-site parking, which has been provided by my client, even though highways are happy about the scheme, will be a condition, and we are happy to give a parking plan to show how the spaces are provided, and maintaining the gaps on site to access the rear of the site that is maintaining. In summary, this building's been empty for 5 years now. It's a blight on the street scene. It needs to be open again. It's a sustainable use. It's in a commercial area. It's going to employ local people. It meets planning policy. It meets highways policy. I appreciate not every scheme makes everybody happy. I get that. But this surely does enough to get an empty building back open again in a good location. Opposite the site, you've got 6 businesses opposite there. You've got a builder's merchants, a toll station, an insurance company. It's a commercial area. I appreciate, we can't make everybody happy, but with strict planning conditions, as the planner stated, this can be a good business and a good location. And if my client doesn't adhere to the conditions, then that's what enforcement's there for. As Chris advised, unilaterals are in place for the flat up there, so contributions will be there. As the guys saw this afternoon, the back of the site isn't being used for waste. It's been well maintained. It's grass grown on there now. It's not being used for building storage, waste storage. We're just trying to get an empty building back on the street scene rather than having a boarded up empty unit, which isn't good for Colchester. Thank you very much. I hope we can get this back on track. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now call Councillor Scott Littell. And you've got 5 minutes and the bell will ring after 4. And at 4:30, I'll be asking you to wind up. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, committee. Thank you for taking the time to visit the site today and look at the alternative parking proposals. I'm aware that there are 2 entrances to the Stanway garage and neither are marked up as entrance or exit. Both are already busy with recovery trucks, delivery vehicles and customers using both to enter and exit. If one is inaccessible due to a parked vehicle, they use the other. I fail to see how this would work with a dedicated area for parking for the proposed cafe. This would be extra pressure on entrances and exits, coupled with pedestrian vehicle conflict, identical to the reason that parking was refused behind the cafe. I saw the most bizarre thing today. The garage forecourt has been completely cleared of cars. I've never witnessed that before in all the years I've lived in Stanway. Anyone might think that the planning committee could be visiting the site today. And what happens tomorrow when the vehicles for sale are returned to the forecourt? In fact, on the way here, I saw that cars were already returning. No one will look to buy a car that is hidden away to the rear of the garage. The forecourt is the used car business's showroom. I explained previously the reasons that parking in the roads with no enforcement markings would not work. They are either private roads or even further away from the proposed cafe than the garage. The other issue that has been overlooked is there's no disabled parking. Where are the blue badge holders supposed to park? I know that they can park on double yellow lines, so are they going to park on double yellow lines on London Road? That would certainly impact on the highway network as its main distributor route. Committee spoke last time about signage directing drivers to the Stanway garage. Vehicles are going to have to pull up and read the sign directing them to another location. To reach the garage on the other side of the road, they either have to U-turn on London Road or drive to the next roundabout to safely double back. There will be implications that this will impact on the traffic flow. Remaining on the subject of signage, I don't know if the committee clocked the electrical wires in situ at the front of the proposed cafe. Call me a cynic, but they look as if they've been left there ready for illuminated signage. Needless to say, there's been no application for consent. The final point that I wish to raise is that we appear to have the issue of light pollution. I drove past last night at 10 o'clock, only to see that there was light spilling out from the ground floor proposed cafe. It was brightly lit up in purple. Nothing wrong with the colour purple, but totally inappropriate for the situation and impacting on the street scene. And why lit up like this at 10 p.m. when it's conditioned to shut at 6 p.m? However, the plans still show a bar area, and it may be the bright purple lighting is mood lighting for the bar. Who knows? Stanway Parish Council has strongly objected, along with numerous objections from Stanway residents. I have seen nothing to support this application. The history of this application has become farcical, and if approved, I envisage Colchester City Council will have to continue to enforce the many condition breaches that will occur and retrospective applications that will eventually come in. The evidence of action which has already been undertaken to date supports this view, and for these reasons I urge the committee to refuse. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scott-Littell. Can I just ask Chris whether he would address some of the issues, and if there's any highways issues, to ask Martin whether he'd come in afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, the two entrances at the garage, there aren't any highway objections to that. We can, as I said, add to that condition about getting precise layout in the garage area. There are quite large entrances, to be fair, so I would have thought one way or the other, most of the time people could get into that site. Yes, the front of the garage was cleared completely, but you know, it would have to be cleared to comply with the condition, and that'll be down to whether the people at the garage want to run their business differently. If they don't want to run their business differently and not have the parking provision on the front of the garage, then they won't be able to comply with the conditions applied, and the cafe won't be able to be used. So, you know, it's down to the option of the garage. If they're happy to not sell their cars at the front of the site, fair enough. If they still want cars there, they will still have to make sure that they've got parking provision for the cafe. So, you know, it's down to their business option, basically. But the condition would still have to be complied with for the cafe to be open. Yes, the point about disabled parking was raised on site. I think it would be a good idea to add in a disabled parking space in front of the cafe, so we could condition that. Illuminated signage, they haven't got any permission for advertisements at the front of the site. You can do some advertisements without advertisement consent, but you know, we would have to see exactly what they want to determine whether consent is required. So it is controlled under normal legislation, you know, like any other site, basically. Light pollution, it's a bit of an unusual one in that property. How much control we have over lighting coming out of a property is debatable, basically. If it's internal, if it's not external lighting, is there the control? I'm not entirely sure about that. Simon might want to make a comment on that in due course. Yes, it's been a long planning history, but that does happen on planning applications sometimes. There have been retrospective work, but again, it's not illegal to do work in advance of planning permission. It's certainly not advisable. But that's why there's an application in place, and that's why there was enforcement action which closed down and stopped work until it was resolved. So I'll pass over to Martin now, who may want to make a comment about the extra pressure on the road network from, in particular, the use of the garage site and the access points, and also potentially people manoeuvring and turning round in front of the cafe. Thank you, Chairman.
Sorry, Martin, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. I'll be honest, I'm struggling to add to the advice that Chris has already given, and without wishing to repeat myself from the last planning committee, I think the only thing I can really add is perhaps give some advice around the use of the forecourt for the parking. I was there for the site visit this afternoon. I think members probably need to remember that it was a garage, so it's a land use that is used to a lot of vehicular movements, and it's got two entrance points. visibility is good, it's just a typical urban layout, speeds are low. So I think provided Chris is content that he can condition details to be submitted to the LPA for a scheme of parking that's then to be open in perpetuity, then I think that's probably covered that issue.
Thank you, Martin. Okay, it's now open to the committee. If you want to speak, indicate to my Vice Chair and he will give me the running order. Yeah, Councillor Gocher.
Thank you, Chair. I've had a look at some of the, it looks like 18 objections to the proposal, and so it just conjures up a few questions in my mind. Firstly, concerns about parking. One thing I'd like to ask, and apologies if I've missed this in the documentation, but is there any provision on the site for cycling infrastructure in terms of cycle racks? Because obviously it is in a residential area, so shouldn't we be encouraging cycling, walking to the cafe? So what provision is there for cycling racks on the site? I might have missed that. Secondly, does the area around it have a residential parking system? What is that system? Because there clearly are fears that there'll be cafe people parking in resident places. So can that fear be alleviated? Because there's, what is the scheme around it? Thirdly, is this cafe posing to offer takeaways, or is it simply an eat-in cafe? Obviously, there's concerns being raised about litter, but if it's eating in, then I imagine the litter won't be that bad. But if it's takeaways, it might be a different story. So what is the likelihood of takeaways? And that's a concern or just a question I have rather than a concern. In terms of opening times, are the opening times, what time is it being proposed to close at night? And are the opening times in any way inconsistent with elsewhere? Because there have been issues raised here. Finally, I suppose a concern a lot of people would be having is with things like smells from the business and so on. So is the extractor fan completely legally compliant with regulations, I suppose would be the question there. Thank you.
Councillor Spindler.
Hello, yeah, thank you very much for taking us down to the site. It was a lot more easier to understand what we're looking at. One of my main concerns was, as a disabled person, you would have to go, I know it's not a finished building because they stopped everything, but you'd have to walk out of the building to go to the back of the building where toilets were going to be at some point built or something, because there was no toilets inside. So that's my concern. They couldn't go to the back of the building because there's a step going down. So if you're disabled, you would not be able to get out via the back. So you'd have to come out the front of the shop, go to the side of the shop and to the back to go to the bathroom. So that was one of my main concerns.
Thank you. And next is Councillor Rippingdale.
So just building on that point, I haven't seen on the plans where these toilets are going to be. And it wasn't until we went today, I realised that when they said we're going to be in a different building, that we actually hadn't seen those plans, or them included in the planning documents. Also, the back where it said area used to cover and secure storage for 12 cycles, I don't think there is space there for 12 cycles, and actually a more appropriate use would be to move it to the opposite the outbuilding, because I think actually that would give you more space and more movement room if you did have to use the external outbuildings for toilets for disabled people to get out there, because it's not a very wide door, and I wasn't actually clear which door would allow that access out to those buildings. So from my perspective, I still don't feel like there's been enough consideration for the active travel. I also raised a point on site about the SPDs, and maybe Simon can elaborate on this, about the supplementary planning documents. How many of those apply to commercial in terms of our active travel and electric vehicle charging and all of those kind of things? So we weren't entirely sure, so I'd like some clarity on whether there's any conditions that could be applied through our supplementary planning documents. But in terms of the cycle storage, I don't think it's an appropriate place. And like I said, I haven't seen the plans for the toilets to be in a separate facility. In terms of the parking, having an urban ward myself and having cafes in there where there is no parking, the fact that there is parking off-site is fine. I mean, has there been any consideration to actually flip the parking so that they use the parking for the cafes at the back of that site rather than the front? So because it might be easier, because I had concerns, and I've seen it on a Friday night down there where people are trying to back off from the fish and chip shop and the Chinese. It's just carnage. But I just wondered whether there had been any consideration to flip the proposal so that the cafe used the land at the back rather than the land at the front, because it might be more suitable.
Thank you. Okay, there's no other indication. Oh, sorry, right. Okay, Councillor Hagan.
Always forgotten, but there you go. No, that's all right. No, it's been noted. Thank you, Chair. I was pleased to attend the site visit today, and I have to just declare that this application is in my ward. I have to declare as well, I'm a parish councillor, because Councillor Scott Patel did mention about the parish council objecting. I don't know whether the monitor, Robert, you could give me some advice whether or not I can vote on it, because obviously it has been discussed. But I did want to raise a couple of questions, if that's okay. Now, it was mentioned that the area is commercial. Well, actually, that side of London Road is not. It's 99.9% residential. There used to be a post office there, but that was a long time ago. It has been left empty for a long time, and yes, there has been comments that we do need to generate and make use of, and you know, having the ability there to present some form of dwelling upstairs is a good thing. I do question the parking, as I'm not going to repeat myself or what others have said, but I do want to just raise one point, that actually there is a walkway through to Peace Road. And those that know the area know how busy Peace Road can get, and the challenges that face residents on a day-to-day, not only from speeding, but also cars that are parked there, where those might then decide to get the bus and disappear off left or right. We also have the same issue down on New Farm Road. Now, today I saw a taxi bus approaching to turn right into the cafe area to park up. And there were you know, people in the bus, and they got out the bus, but what they didn't see is while the taxi was waiting to turn right to pull into the cafe, was the car speeding down London Road who mounted the pavement to get round the car. Now, if there'd have been a camera there, it should have been picked up. It should have been picked up on the speed camera. This is my concern. This is a very busy road. We've had an application go into the local highways panel that has had a really in-depth report about the improvements to the Millers Lane junction crossing down there to be upgraded to traffic controlled rather than just a zebra crossing. There has been an incident recently, an RTA incident down there as well. It's a very busy road. We need to understand from the perspective of this application going through and the parking being on the other side of the road, 100 metres away. It's going to be, you know, a question of whether or not the crossing gets used, where the cars will stop all the time, and you're going to get this flow of people. They're looking at 38 seats. The covers are you know, quite, you know, there's a high amount of covers that they need to maybe turn a profit. I don't know. I've not seen the business plan. So these are the concerns that I have. It's about traffic flow, not just from pedestrians, but it's also about people parking their cars, using the cafe, and also people running across the commercial units on the opposite side of the road and not using the crossing. Okay, so, and I have seen that today. I do have concerns about that. I'm all for business. I'm all for making use of, units that need to be brought back to life, and well done to the developer for doing so. It would have been prudent to get the planning application first. I don't necessarily agree with retrospective applications, but that's my own personal opinion. But again, we need to understand, this cafe can provide a great service to the local area, but at the same time, the traffic congestion, the pedestrian conflicts that we're going to see. Let's look at the report, the CB2 report figures from the Millers Lane application and see what those comments are. And I would actually ask perhaps Highways if they could bring that information up. Perhaps it is available. I have the report if you want me to ping it over. So that's something I'd like the committee to consider. And I want to thank visiting Councillor Mayor, I can never get it right, can I? There you go. The Mayor for attending this evening and speaking on this, and also the developers representative for coming along as well, and for allowing us to look around the site. It's very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have 14 different points raised there. Chris, if you'd like to address the ones you can, and then whoever can assist, do so.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I haven't counted points, but I've got some noted down. The condition for cycle parking, condition 12, says that it shall be provided in accordance with the current parking standards. Cycle parking shall be secure, convenient, covered and provided prior to occupation. If you want that condition tightened, then we could expand that to say the precise details of the location of the cycle parking shall be provided. There's plenty of room on site to provide it in various places if it's deemed that the shed is not adequate. So we can expand that condition to get precise details. There's more area to provide cycling provision on this site than most other sites, I would say. So that can be covered with an expanded condition. Let's see, the next point. I don't know about the residential parking system in the area. Martin Mason may know more details of that. There's certainly no objections on parking provision grounds and parking provision impact in the area or the capacity. In terms of other points made, there is a condition about there should be no takeaway from the site, so that should cover Mark Goach's comment there. Also, the condition about opening times, which is condition 3, and the opening times up to 6 o'clock weekdays and no opening on Sundays and public holidays. So in terms of other opening times in the areas, I can't imagine that that goes beyond the opening times of other businesses in the area. I suspect other businesses probably open later than that, to be honest. The other questions, smells. There is a condition for the precise details of the flue system, which is a condition to ensure mitigation of fumes and odours, and that's condition 7. So that was discussed with environmental protection, and that's the condition they suggested. In terms of provision of toilets, that will be covered by building regulations. If they can't meet building regulations, they can't basically open. So those issues are covered with building regulation legislation. Covered cycles. Active travel and SPDs, Simon may wish to make a comment on that in due course. It normally relates to quite large schemes, you get a traffic or a travel plan submitted, but this is a relatively small commercial operation with relatively few staff. So putting a travel plan condition on, probably not deemed reasonable, but Simon might wish to make a comment on that. Electric vehicle charging points, that's an interesting one. We could put a condition on about electric vehicle charging points. Whether that would be deemed reasonable is debatable, particularly as it's not considered in reality that we could recommend refusal of the scheme if you didn't have the parking spaces provided in the garage. The applicant has indicated a willingness to do electric vehicle parking provision. Obviously, if it's provided in the garage opposite, there's only the 10-year lease. It's questionable, is it reasonable to put that condition on? I think we'd probably have to have a discussion about that, but the applicant is willing to do that. We did look at potential for parking at the rear of the cafe, and indeed a plan was submitted showing substantial parking areas to the rear, but that was deemed potentially seriously detrimental to the amenity of residents surrounding that area. So that was taken out of the scheme. It wasn't in the original scheme. It was an option put forward, but there were serious concerns about that, so it was not pursued and was taken out of the scheme. Other comments? Yes, this side of the road is predominantly residential, but that's been acknowledged all along. This was a residential building. The fact that it is residential surrounding this site, except opposite, was why so many conditions have been recommended in terms of environmental protection and hours of opening, takeaways, etc. So very stringent conditions put on to keep the use tightly buttoned down, and no use of the area to the rear for cafe, and quite tight opening hours, closing at 6 o'clock. Those are pretty tight conditions for a cafe, to be honest. Again, Councillor Hagan raised serious concerns about pedestrian conflicts and use of the crossings, and I'll leave Martin to comment on that, but we have already indicated that from our point of view it's not considered there would be a highway safety issue in the area. So I think that covers what I've got down. If there's anything you want me to add, then please let me know.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, there are some points that you didn't cover off. There's points raised by Councillor Rippingale, who said that she hadn't seen any plans for the disabled toilets. The rear door was not wide enough to allow, presumably, wheelchair use. And also she was asking, would it be possible to flip the parking, to look at parking at the rear of the cafe rather than further down the road? In terms of disabled access to the toilet, I mean, my understanding of the Equality Act is that you should not disadvantage somebody who has a protected characteristic in comparison to somebody that doesn't. So how does the concerns over disability access to the toilet, do you think they've been adequately addressed?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I think I did cover some of those, to be honest. Yes, building regs relates to provision of toilets, disabled access, etc. If you can't meet building regs, then you can't run the cafe, basically. I covered the flipping of the parking by mentioning that we didn't want parking to the rear of the site because we thought there'd be a detriment to the amenity of surrounding residents. And as I said, there was a plan submitted to show parking at the back, but we did not think that was a good plan, so we got that withdrawn. Flipping the car parking was not deemed appropriate to have it round the back to affect the residents. Building regs in terms of widths of access, etc., do cover those points. So that is separate legislation to planning. So I think, that covers those latest points, and then the other points about the SPD, Simon might make to comment on that, and perhaps on electric vehicle charging, whether we think we can insist on electric vehicle charging, and then Martin to cover the additional highway issues.
Just before I invite them to do so, can you just cover off Councillor Rippingale's point that she hadn't seen any plans for the disabled toilets? Would the toilets need to be part of this planning application because they are being built in a separate building?
I'm not convinced they were proposed in a separate building, but if they are to be, we could condition precise details. Because on site, the agent indicated that there were going to be various changes to the internal layout of the building, including steps and provision of facilities, but they stopped work because they were served a stop notice. So we can condition for precise details of that if you want. It would be covered on building regs, but can condition the submission of details under the planning application if we wish to cover that off. There is room, on site, but they would need to be compliant with building regs. If they can't comply with building regs in terms of size, provision areas, disabled toilets, etc., then they can't carry on with the cafe basically, or open the cafe.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Hagan's point, he talked about parking issues on Peace Road, and he was saying there was a walkway through to it. So could we address whether that would be an issue that we would deal with at the planning consent stage? Because he's obviously worried that people living in Peace Road are going to struggle to park.
I think I can leave Martin to comment on that, to be honest.
Okay, right, Martin, would you like to come in and cover off any highway points?
No problem, thanks, Chair. I think the first point was around if there are any residents parking in the area. I can confirm there are not, but London Road is subject to WO lines for some distance either side of the site, so it's not possible to park in the highway at the application site. I think the other point, before I go on to Peace Road, was around zebra crossing located in front of the proposed parking area. I think you could argue that you're lucky that it's going to be served by a control crossing. So that's a real bonus really for pedestrians to get across the road. Otherwise, it would be quite a struggle to get across there. It's busy. Yeah, that's a bonus really for pedestrians to get from the car parking area to the site. Peace Road, it's tricky, isn't it? It's a bit like the cul-de-sacs that are off London Road themselves. It's whether it's detrimental to highway safety, any on-street parking that results as additional on-street parking that results from this proposal. Is that detrimental to highway safety? Would we win an appeal? That's the whole thing. That's the whole debate we have to go through in our heads. I think given the cul-de-sacs and Peace Road are subject to 30-mile-an-hour speed limits, not significant congestion in terms of the MPPF. This is the whole discussion that would come out at appeal. I don't think that's defendable at appeal. So the fact that there may be a few cars parked in Peace Road, you can argue that's a safe place to park actually, and walk through to the cafe, and the same with the cul-de-sacs on the other side of the road. Thank you.
Thank you. Simon, have you any comments you wish to make?
Thank you, Chair. Just in response to Councillor Rippingale's comments around sustainable transport, as she correctly points out, all of our policies within the adopted plan do encourage both sustainable and active travel, but we do need to have a proportionate response to what is quite a small business operation. And to that end, obviously, the cycle racks and provision and the suggested condition, requiring details in addition to the condition included on the schedule, to be submitted and agreed, obviously ensure that we can deliver that level of cycle parking to encourage active travel. I think given where the operation is in a residential area that is highly accessible, I think we have to have regard to the fact that we want to encourage people to walk to this premise, and I think probably a lot of the customers will come from within the walking catchment area. In terms of the parking at the rear, Chris has obviously dealt with the issue of flipping that, and indeed we've got a condition on there at condition 15 suggesting that we actually prevent any parking to the rear to protect the amenity of the neighbours, as Chris has explained. I think that probably covers it off, except I think if you wish to have an electric vehicle charging point, you could have one for the dwelling on site, which would be something. So I wouldn't anticipate that the applicant would have a problem with that. So I would suggest that if you're interested in that, we could impose a suitable condition for an EV charging point to be provided to serve the new dwelling on site. I mean, it may be worth having regard to the fact that if this hadn't been a mixed use, i.e. a sorting office, if it had simply been a post office, it would be a permitted change of use to a cafe. It wouldn't even have required a planning application. So it's purely on the technicality that this was a mixed sui generis use that we have an application before us today and are able to impose the raft of conditions to protect neighbours' amenity in terms of the hours of operation, in terms of the use of the rear garden area. All of those points are obviously grist to the mill and show the advantage of having planning control over these uses. But had it been an E-class use already, we wouldn't have had that degree of control. So it's a bit of a sanguine reminder, but we would have obviously had control over any flue which would have been development requiring consent. But I think they may assist members in that sort of rather sanguine fact that otherwise it wouldn't be before us at all. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Rippingale, you wish to come back?
Yeah, the point I was making about the parking wasn't in relation to the actual site of the cafe. It was to do with the garage site. I wondered whether it would be more appropriate to have the parking for the cafe at the back of that site than the front, because you would have a much safer exit in terms of being able to turn in the back and come out of there front ways and onto London Road that way. So that's why I was asking, because actually it might provide a much safer way of providing the parking and for London Road coming out than people trying to reverse off that car parking lot. And that's what I meant. I didn't mean on the cafe site.
Thank you. Councillor Arnold.
Yes, going back to provision of toilets, I know they're under building regulations, but if there was no space that I could see that they can be incorporated in the downstairs structure, so they'll have to be outside, which is the same route round the back the cyclists will be taking. The disabled people who use their wheelchairs, they're going to have to be lighting during the winter months round the side and the back of the property. Has any of these factors been considered in, and should they be part of this planning, as well as show where the toilets are going so we can see the impact of the lighting and the movement of the customers around the property? Thank you.
Thank you. Chris, would you like to come back on those 2 points?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Well, parking to the rear of the garage, I would have thought that probably wouldn't work as well, because you've got the business mechanic working around there, taking his vehicles down there, and I think that would be more of a conflict with customers, to be honest, going down that through the narrow gap and then meeting someone coming back with a car on the back of a transporter, I wouldn't have thought that would be very promising, to be honest, and it's not what's been put forward or offered to us. So I don't think we could insist on that happening. I don't think that would work as well, to be honest. It's sort of hidden away, and then you'd have customers walking along, potentially through that narrow gap to get to the front of the garage, you know, where vehicles do drive down, as we noticed on site, where a transporter was carrying a car on the back going through that gap. So I would have thought that's probably not very advisable, to be honest. The other point, cyclists and disabled people conflict. Well, it's quite a sizable site. There could be, I suppose we could put lighting condition. Remember, the property, the business is only going to be open till 6 o'clock in the evening. I know it gets dark at sort of 4:30. It's a limited time that there may be conflict. I must admit, I've never applied a condition because a cyclist may sort of collide with a disabled person, but you know, you could add a condition about lighting, which would then want turned off when the business is not running around the back. You know, there's a potential to do that, yes.
Thank you, Chris. And Martin, if you could expand on the parking point.
I don't think it's a question for me, sorry, Chair. Unless
Right.
I missed a point here.
Okay, I was under the impression that you would expand upon the points that Chris was making in terms of parking at the rear of the garage site for the off-site parking. Are there any highway issues that you would consider?
No,
Okay,
Chair.
thank you for that. Okay, we've got some more speakers, right. Councillor Hagan, first.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm just having a quick look on Google Earth. Other search engines are available, but Google Earth gives a lovely view of the car parking area. Now, the proposed car parking area at the garage site, what we were understanding was 12 spaces? 10 spaces. What I can see on here, and my colleagues sitting next to me, can actually see where they would have to angle the vehicles to allow in and out to the garage at the back that's just been discussed. They'd have to be on such an angle, you're only going to get 4 on that left side. So, you know, this is what we see, and this is what we see when we've passed on many occasions. The other concern I have looking at this is exiting. You exit onto a bus stop as well as white zigzags leading up to the crossing that we're recommending their customers to use. And also, we'll say the Belicia's out. Martin, if you can report that, that'd be handy. Thank you. Maybe repainting the lines as well. Use every opportunity. That's what I've said. The other concern I do have, and not just Peace Road, is Montbracia Close. And I do have a concern of that because I parked there today to go and do the site visit. So legally, there's no lines, but it does get very busy at certain times. And I just wanted to ask the question, if we're saying that they can fit 10 in, but the evidence is suggesting less, and I'd also say that's in front of number 21A London Road. It's a dwelling. We're not mentioning that the car park is being proposed in front of a dwelling. Now, I know there's a 10-year lease being discussed, but actually, what if that property was to be sold? What's the liability? What's the liability of the vehicles that are going to park in that car park? Is there going to be CCTV in the event of any insurance claim? Or is it owners park here at risk? I mean, none of these have been answered. And of course, you know, if this was dare I say it, a major developer trying to build something over at Tollgate, would be coming at them like you can't do that because X, Y, Z, and asking them to put a blooming great cycle lane through. But that's a whole other conversation. So I need some clarity on the car parking spaces here, because if we were pinning it all on this particular area, I don't think it's fit for purpose, if I'm absolutely honest with you. And exiting onto a crossing that has white lines and a bus stop next to it, in front of a dwelling that we haven't really mentioned or discussed. What's the curtilage of the dwelling? I know Who owns the dwelling? Have we spoken to them? Has, you know, prior notification been given to those residents that live there to say, by the way, did you know you could have a car park in front of you permanently for the next 10 years? I think we need to have some answers on those questions, please. I'd also like to say as well, just on the point of the toilet, at what point do we start allowing commercial developments just to build anything without putting plans in? I mean, we need to be understanding what we're deciding here. And if, you know, and I think that also needs to be raised. But you can't make decisions if we don't know what we're making decisions on. So I'd just like to bring those points forwards. And if anyone else has got any comments, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. So I will ask the officers to come back, but I just want to hear Councillor McLean first.
Thank you, Chair. I think Jeremy's quite correct, actually, because we cannot guarantee the parking on that site at any time, especially when it's out of maybe the developer's ownership, whatever. So I think we need to be very mindful of that. The other item I'm thinking is the suggestion of the parking around the back. You could have low-level lights at sort of knee height going around the back, which would highlight the, you know, the lighting of the area without imposing light pollution to the rest of the area. So, you know, it could be done, but I think, you know, we've just got to be careful how we do it and what we allow, I think.
Okay, right. Simon, you wish to come back?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I was just going to remind members that in terms of the off-site parking, that wasn't seen as necessary to make the proposal acceptable. That was something which was offered up by the applicant as a bonus, if you like, as a way of mitigating members' concerns that should this prove to be an exceptionally popular facility, that there is somewhere for those arriving by car to leave their vehicle in the general vicinity. If members don't wish that to be included, I'm sure that could be excluded as part of the application if they were so minded. With regard to the WC provision, I think Councillor Hagan is entirely correct. If they were proposing to build something to house these loos, then they would need planning permission for that. So I suggest that we impose a condition to say that details of the provision of WCs including full disabled access to serve the development be submitted to Council for approval and thereafter constructed prior to the opening of the facility. Chris is quite right. Normally we wouldn't seek to duplicate something which is provided by building regulations, but members have indicated that it's not clear that this can be accommodated within the building. There are also concerns around ensuring that these are accessible, and I think to that end we could quite reasonably condition details of a scheme of fully accessible loos to be submitted and approved as a condition to address those concerns, including any associated lighting to serve that. So thank you for that, raising that, members. It is an important point. We are always mindful of the need to provide full disabled accessibility wherever we can control that by planning. Hopefully that answers those points. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And if I could just ask Robert, the committee clerk, to answer Councillor Hagan's point on voting.
Thank you, Chair. So with regards to members, obviously ward members, publicly no knowledge, and it doesn't affect you in terms of needing to make any declaration. With regards to being a parish councillor, I need to ask the question of whether you made a decision on it when you were part of the parish council. I've checked and it doesn't appear that you were on the planning committee for this parish council. So in that sense, you just need to declare that a non-registered interest that you are a member of the parish council.
Okay, I declare a non-registrable interest that I'm a member of the parish council, and that should be good.
That's it.
Just to make a point there, the parish council, whether the planning or not, is an entity as such, and the parish council speaks as the parish council.
Yeah, that's fine, Chair. Just to clarify on that point, it's just to make sure, because the actual regulations detail that it is anybody exercising functions of a public nature. So being a member of that would count as that as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So I have Councillor Spindler that wishes to speak.
Just very quickly, I've gone again. I've had concerns about the bathroom facilities. I know that's not part planning, and I'm very concerned about approving something that we haven't got all the contents in front of us. Also, we're visiting the site, which was very good to visit. It is obvious, even though the works have stopped, the only way to get to disabled toilets is only through the front door, along the side of the building to the back, wherever they're going to put them. I realise obviously they haven't finished doing everything that they've got to do, but the road at the side of the building is not safe for anybody with disabilities, and a trip hazard. So obviously they would have to resurface all that to wherever they're putting the toilets, and a proper path going to wherever these toilets are.
And Councillor Rippingale.
Similar question. I wouldn't be happy to approve this plan without seeing the plan for the toilets. So where does that, my understanding is, where does that leave us in approving this planning application? Because there's still bits out, there's questions outstanding. So that's what I want to understand is, would we, though there's a condition around the toilets, does that mean we're going to vote on this application today, or does it mean that we have to defer it again until we see that? I just want some clarity.
Thank you. Yeah, I think Simon will be able to clarify, but there is an offer to put conditions on which will demand the precise details prior to occupation of a cafe.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I can understand the concerns of Councillor Arnold and Spindler, and we'd be very happy on the receipt of those details to consult with you to make sure you're happy with those details, if that would help. We don't normally consult with members on discharge of conditions, but given the specialist nature of it and obviously your expert experience and knowledge in that area, we think it would be very helpful to have your input to discharging any condition on those details, which could of course include the pathway leading to the WCs, the accessibility in terms of door widths, and any lighting associated with those WCs. So the scheme which we will require to be submitted will include details to ensure they are fully accessible.
Thank you.
So, sorry about that. So we're voting tonight on the consent of it to continue to go forward as long as everything that we've raised is going to happen, just so that I understand.
Yep, thank you, Councillor Spindler. If you could come through the chair, that would be great. If you'd like to answer that, Simon, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, to clarify matters for Councillor Spindler, what we are suggesting is that the application is approved this evening with conditions. When we get the specific condition relating to the provision of accessible WCs, we will specifically consult with you, Councillors Arnold and Spindler, to make sure you're happy with those details. It's probably not of relevance to consult the rest of the committee. We wouldn't normally do that, but given the specialist nature of it and your unique insights to that particular area, it would be really helpful to have your input, so thank you.
Thank you. Right, we've chewed the cud on this well, so I'm going to allow Councillor McLean and Councillor McCarthy, and then we're going to try and reach a conclusion. Councillor McLean.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to suggest that we defer it till we get all the blocks in order to come back to us, that we've ticked all the boxes. We can confirm we've ticked all the boxes and we'll all be happy, because I think we've had enough information given for the officers tonight to actually have that come back to us and make sure it's all above board. And then we'll all be happy, and then there'll be nobody all upset if something goes wrong. That's what I was thinking.
Thank you. I'll just ask Councillor McCarthy to speak, and then I'll come back to your deferral.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'd actually go one further and refuse it. It's heavily conditioned already. I'm not filled with confidence at all. And we're using building regs as defence for everything. I'm not getting any clear answers to anything tonight from what I can gather. I would say we refuse the application. I want a new application to come in, and I want that new application to include the bathrooms and be far more detailed. And to all the things that we've raised tonight, I don't feel, I mean, conditioning everything is ridiculous. It's the most heavily conditioned application I think I've ever seen now. I can't believe it. So I would actually go one further and say we refuse it. I want a new application with the bathrooms included.
Thank you. Can I ask whether there's a seconder to that, please? Councillor Hagan, you're seconding it. Kay, can we address the drop procedure, please?
Chair, just before we go on to that, I think we'll need to clarify, first of all, specific reasons on what Mr Cairns would be able to provide advice, if that's acceptable from the proposer and seconder.
Well, of course it's acceptable. So to the proposer first, what are your specific reasons?
Yeah, I'm trying to work that out now. So mine would be around disabled access and around the toilet facilities. I don't like that it's being conditioned that we include something like that. If it's a cafe, I think it should be in the application from the off. So I don't think this application is satisfactory. I don't think we've had any of the details that we really require. We've not been able to get to the root of most of these things, and we're just conditioning and using building regs as a defence for the application, which I don't find satisfactory. I'm sorry, I can't think of a more, planning. Yeah, I'll leave it there, Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, just to remind members that we should be looking for material planning reasons. Councillor Hagan, do you wish to add any points?
I think, again, it's important that we make informed decisions as a committee based on the plans that have been presented to us. If those plans are not complete, we're not making a complete assessment of the application, despite whether there's parking here or parking there. That's part of the question. But actually, the core issues that we face here is that there's no plans for facilities for everyone there, accessible or otherwise. And actually, the comments raised there is my colleagues to my left. If you need to, use the loo, you've got to come out the front door and go down a very unstable pathway to God knows where, to the bin store perhaps, who knows. So we need to understand what is it we're actually going to be voting for. I second, because I think that we need to have a fresh application in. I understand work's gone ahead, but this is what happens when you do work without plans. These things can come along. We're not saying no. I've always said that I support small business, and I hope that perhaps if we get this right, this business will be successful. But actually, we want to make sure that it's accessible for all, and that's the key point to take away here from what I'm understanding. And I hope that colleagues can support Councillor McCarthy's proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hagan. So can I just have an indication from you both that you feel that refusal rather than deferral is the appropriate road to take, because we could defer it and wait for the information you're seeking to come back, but you're proposing one step further. So could you just indicate yes or no whether you think refusal is the appropriate?
Yes, because I don't think deferring is going to change the application itself. So we need a fresh application.
And Councillor Hagan?
I agree with Councillor McCarthy's comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Davison, you want to come in?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I've heard the debate. Certainly, it's a very muddled application. I'd like to hear from Mr. Cairns as to the risk of appeal. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so on to Simon, if you could address the drop procedure and Councillor Davis' point about the risk on appeal.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, and as we've sought to ensure in member training an awareness of the fact that planning applications have to be refused on material planning grounds. There are no matters here that cannot be dealt with by conditions to make this application acceptable, in our view. I cannot identify any reasons for refusal that would stand up in an appeal. As I've explained previously, if this wasn't for the fact that it had previously been a mixed use, it wouldn't even need planning permission. Any inspector is not likely to be sympathetic to views to matters which are covered by other legislation, i.e. building control. It's not a defence, it's not obfuscating our duties here. Clearly we are very keen to ensure full disabled access, and it's something we can do by the use of conditions. I fear if you were to refuse this, it would not be a positive outcome for anybody. I think it would send the wrong messages with regard to the principle of the use. We have an application before us which has been heavily negotiated. The applicant has sought to address local concerns around parking through the provision of a novel scheme of off-site parking, which normally many cafes in parades of shops simply have no parking at all. It's unusual. We don't have any minimum parking standards for this use. They are maxima. And as we've heard from a few members this evening, we're here to encourage sustainable and active travel. So in terms of the drop procedure, any risk would relate to costs being allowed on appeal for unreasonable behaviour. As I've explained, I don't think we have identified any particular substantive conflicts with adopted planning policies to refuse this use upon. The matters which you are concerned about could be covered by condition, or indeed, if you wish to defer, you could defer it and have those details submitted at the present time. But I would certainly advise you against refusing it, which I don't think would be constructive, to be honest. But the decision obviously rests with members. The risks are minimal in terms of costs, but in terms of process, I don't think it will actually add value to refuse now, when you could defer or you could approve subject to conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'll ask Robert, the committee clerk, to address the drop, and I believe he also wants some clarification on what the refusal reasons will be from the proposer and seconder.
Thank you, Chair. So as members will note, on the last page of their agenda, the drop procedure is included. So we've got to the point where risks, we've asked Mr. Cairns for information on that. And as I understand it, the risks require more research are considered. And Mr. Cairns, can you just confirm what you considered the risks were minimal, was it?
Yes, thank you, Chair. The risk would solely relate to any costs to be allowed on appeal, and obviously the risk of losing any or having any appeal allowed would potentially be high, given that your concerns are capable of being addressed through the use of conditions, which would normally be the route we would take. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and I believe you wish further clarification from the proposer and seconder.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm afraid, Councillor McCarthy, I was unclear on your specific reasons for planning refusal. If I could have a bit more clarity so that we can have something.
Thanks, Robert. I think Simon's kind of changed my tune a little bit. I'm happy to withdraw it if Councillor Hagan is, and I would look to find out a little bit more about a potential deferral.
Yeah, I second that thing.
Thank you. So the proposal to refuse is withdrawn. So we move to Councillor McLean in terms of proposing a deferral.
So I think we should defer it for specific details to come back to us of the disabled toilets and the accessibility in full clarity for everybody to see and to know where it's going, with maybe some drawings or something. And I think we'll be all a lot happier, because all I've heard tonight is regarding the disabled and, you know, and that sort of accessibility. And I think that way it stops any sort of form of cost or anything, but we can just, you know, get a clarity on where we all are.
Thank you, Councillor McLean. Is there a seconder to that, please? Councillor Spindler. So can I ask all those in favour of a deferral, please show?
That is unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. So we are deferring the application to come back to meet the points that members have discussed, and we talked about 5 different conditions that could be applied that officers have noted. So that therefore concludes the meeting. Can I thank you all for your time this evening?